better make some putts better than that. I mean, come on. So what did you just see? A whole bunch of missed putts for a whole bunch of different reasons. However, you know, other than length and grip and the way that you look at it, some of the simplest corrections can be made with a loft or lie adjustment. You just saw where I did a review on the Golf Mechanic Evolution 2 putter bender. Now, it's an updated version of what I already had with the digital display, which, you know, allows for a little more precision. So what we talked about is, well, how do you make bends, right? How do you make those bends so that sole, you know, typically you want the sole flattened out on the ground. You don't want it too much in the air. You don't want it too much toe down. You want the right amount of loft based on how you putt, right? Based on how you putt and based on the conditions you're putting in, right? So if you are putting in an area that is very hairy, then you might want a little more loft so you can get the ball up and on. Or if you're very, very manicured, you might want to get the ball rolling as fast and quickly as you want to, and you would lower the loft. That's what we're looking at. So how do you do that? Therein lies the trick. How do you make those bends? Well, using the bending bar that we talked about earlier in the review, there's the large block and there's the small block. Has the non-marring internals that are replaceable. As you can see, they've got the little screw head in there, right? So that you don't mar the finish, right? A lot of these very expensive putters come with a different finish on them. They will be, you know, darker in color. They could be a whole different paint job for that matter. Then the other side is that you have the shafts that go into the putter. Now we need to talk about that for just a moment. When you have, there are several different kinds of ways that the shaft actually installs into a putter. When you have a plumber's neck, very much like that, right? The old Anser style, everybody's got a tribute to the Anser, hence plumber's neck. There normally is an insert that goes inside the hosel. That's a standard issue insertion, much like any other stick and glue job, right? So that would be one way of doing it. Another way is what they would call an over the hosel kind of setup. And this over the hosel is that, you know, there's nothing for the shaft ends right there, and that's where the putter begins, which means that there's a bit of more putter sticking up into this area, and that shaft goes over the putter or over the hosel, right? Because that would technically be the hosel, right? This whole thing. So it goes over that. Now, in a lot of cases, in some other manufacturers, it's called a flare. And a flare, what it means is it gets down to here and it gets bigger in order to look good in the style of the putter that's there. Okay, but it can happen on a putter like this where there's a bigger neck, or it can happen on a putter where there's no neck. All right, you can tell that this one because it's got this little ferrule that acts as a medium between the two, so it makes it look a little bit cleaner. That's the whole idea. So what you have is there's a piece of this putter head that sticks up about that far over the hosel, right? Those are super easy to bend. However, there are times where the shaft goes straight into the putter head. They go straight into the putter head. Now, depending on the type of shaft that you get, right? This one just happens to be what they used to call a ski pole. And a ski pole was for the taller putters, and they were very brutish. I mean, these things were very, very stout. It just went from insertion to boom, and it was just really big. Those things are massively hard to bend, and when they're really, really stiff, really, really hard to bend, you really run the risk of denting them or even breaking them for that matter. Now, the other ones that go straight in there that are just regular, yeah, those things are a little bit easier to bend, but the same issues still apply, right? You could dent them, so you got to really, because you're bending shaft, you're not bending putter. You got to be really, really careful. And when you see models that are like that, you're not going to get, you know, oh, can you bend it 4 degrees or anything? Well, no, right? Not without doing some serious, you know, either damage or it's going to come out looking super ugly. And you don't want either one. And so you might get a degree or two, right? A degree or two out of that. And that's about as far as you want to go. Otherwise, you run the risk of ruining the structural integrity, right? We don't want to do that because, well, you're replacing a shaft, and we don't want to do that either. So you got to be careful of that. Double bend putters, same way, right? They can go into the thing like that. and it's already been bent, so there's already been stress put on it. And you can bend, and you always bend as close to the putter as you possibly can. You don't bend above the double bend. That doesn't buy anybody anything, because now you can turn the double bend, right? And you have run the risk of, and it's really soft in that neck of the woods, so you could really damage the shaft. Okay, so how do you really apply the pressure to that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about now. Okay, as you see, we're going to put in a left-handed putter, an Odyssey 1, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the block first, and then that way what we can use is the long arm. I really like the long arm better. All right, and then what will happen here is you run the arm up into it, and then what it does is it rests into the back of the cavity of the putter, and it puts it up against the face block. And that's what we want, is up against the face block. Then we'll run down our hold down unit, with the red longer arms. I like the knurled knob, and then you're set. Then what we'll do is we'll put the gauge on it, because I've already got the gauge turned on, and we clamp that in, one of the very nice pieces of this particular putter, and then we'll apply the bending on it. Now, based on what we've seen, you got to make sure that size is correct or that size is correct, and you want it as close as you can so that it doesn't slide. In this particular instance, this is the one that's better. Now, if you want to flatten it, you pull it towards you. If you want to upright it, it goes away from you. You want to use both hands, right? Very rarely do you get away with that unless you have to steady it and you're really pushing a lot on it, but these are putters. You shouldn't have to do that. You get up in here and you make this turn, you make this bend. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to be able to see it on here on the display, what you'll have is some muscle memory or metal memory. And when you'll go up and you go, oh, I've been all the way up, and you'll come back and it'll look almost the same. You're like, well, what's happening? Well, one of two things are happening. One, you don't have it in the jig tight enough and it's been moving with you, the putter moves with you, and it does happen. Or it's a very hard steel and it feels like you're moving it and then it's coming back. You're going to actually, you can feel the metal giving when you've done this for a while. Now, the other part is if you want to make more loft, you will pull down, it makes more loft, and if you push away, it makes less loft. Same concepts, right? Use both hands, feel it, measure it, feel it, measure it, feel it, measure it. That's what you do. Now, let's say you've got the other one where the shaft goes into the putter. I'll take this guy out first, and this is my Peretti, one of my first putters. And it just so happens I can get it into the back. I could have used the other model, the block, but as I've said before, I prefer that, and it's a much more solid hold down. We get the hold down on top of it. Now, could I use the silver one and use the smaller one? Well, I could, but it's kind of sloppy, and I want to move upward on it. So when you do stuff that's on shafts, you want to grab as much as you can. If you grab little, you really run the risk of bending it. Just imagine, bending a piece of wire, right? It's an easier when you're out here on the edges. It bends easier this way, and you get in here, it tends to crinkle. So what do we use? These are what would be the typical bending bars that you would receive with a machine. This one's for large gaps, maybe like the dual bends maybe, or a large, where the length of the bends or the length of the neck is a little longer. Or what I tend to use the most of is this one, where it's very close. Now you go, well, hey Jim, that's not much bigger than the other one. Well, it's as big as the big block, and it's a little bit easier to manipulate. So for this one, for going up, I would be in here and I would pull up like that, and you see how much I'm being able to move this, and that's not doing a thing to it, and I'm really moving this up here, and it'll go right back to where it was. But this is what I would use. Right, this one you could use in that same fashion, but you see you get a little bit more, and you see how much more easier it is to move. But again, you got to watch where it's actually applying the force. keep an eye on that, because it's going to be really easy to dent that. If I can't harp that one enough. So you have plumber's necks, you got over the hosels, and you've got into the putter heads. And the basic movements is to feel, right? To feel the metal or the shaft giving. You should be fine for there. And then you got to make more putts. So hopefully I'm helping you with this one. And if you do, put some show notes down. Put in the comments in the show notes. Have you ever had your putter bent before? Has it helped? Hey, do you do it on your own? You need any advice on what's going on? Just put it down there and let me know. And as always, let's see your scores go low.